Thank you for joining us. I think we have a special... Moses, welcome. Come on
Good
up.
morning, everybody. How is everybody doing? Hey there. Hey, I'm Moses. Who are all of you? I don't know if I've met all of you guys, but I mean, there's been a lot of people around here lately, so I might have just kind of not met every one of you personally yet. I see a couple familiar faces. Hi, how you guys doing? So I just, I'm almost 120 years old. So I've had a long journey of my life, and I gotta admit, I think slowly but surely, my long life journey, a journey of ups and of downs, of great times, of great trust, of miracles, and of utter failure and just bad decisions. It's coming to an end. It was a long journey. It was a wonderful journey. And the crazy thing is, it started out even before I was born. There was just this crazy thing. I wasn't born here. I was born very far away. I was born in Egypt. And the king there, he decided that he would throw all of my family, all of my people, all their baby boys were supposed to be killed. They were supposed to be thrown into a river. And I was supposed to be one of them. But as you can tell, that didn't happen. And I was lucky enough because I had a bit of a cheeky mom. Because my mom, she followed orders, but not without trusting God and trying to protect me at all costs. So my mom, she threw me into the water, but only after she built something for me to protect me. So she threw me in the water, and you can read about this story in Exodus 1 and 2. So she threw me into the water, and if you look in Exodus 2, verse 3, it'll say something like, she built me a basket and put me into the water. But when my mom told me this story of how I was born, actually, she told me a little bit of a different word in my language. She said she built me an ark. She built an ark for me. And you want to know something fun? The word ark, there's exactly 2 stories that talk about this word ark. It's Noah's ark and my ark. So God, what he did with Noah, he delivered all of humanity through Noah, who was in an ark. And now, in my life story, he delivered all of Israel through me, and he delivered me also through an ark. So God works in very many miraculous ways. And because my mom was so cheeky, and because he saved me, is that thunder? Because my mom was so cheeky and she saved me, I was able to grow up at the king's palace. So I was someone that just I could ask for anything I wanted. All the luxuries in the world I could ever have. But something was still off. Something was off. My people, they were treated differently. They had a different childhood. And I think it's... Oh, hi, Malachi. Hey, you've aged quite a bit since I've gotten to know you. Let me tell you something. I've been talking about my childhood. I don't know if you overheard anything of this, but can you tell me about your childhood a little bit?
Oh, hey, Moses. I thought you had wandered off again. You guys better be careful. You'll look away for 1 second and he'll just disappear. And just between us, he's not a very good leader. He's had us wandering around this wilderness for 40 years now.
Thanks for the flattery, Malachi. I hope you realize that it wasn't actually me leading, but it was God leading.
Sorry, Moses, I didn't think you could hear me. What was your question again?
How was your childhood? Can you tell me about it a little bit?
Well, when I was a kid, me, my friends, my family, we all lived in Egypt. Back there, we had all the water, the food, we had everything we could ever want.
Are you sure about that?
Okay. Well, my parents were slaves, and they had to build giant buildings for the king, and all they got for it was harsh treatment. And then you came along, and you told us and all the Israelites and the Egyptians about God, and you guided us out of Egypt.
Thanks, Malachi, for the true story. But never forget, there's one thing. It wasn't me leading. It wasn't me leading all of Israel out of Egypt, but instead it was God leading. God is guiding us out of Egypt into the promised land, and we can trust God because he guides and provides. I'm really excited about VBS this week, as you could probably tell. And I personally love it because, so we're going to take a look at the life of Moses over the week. And to me personally, the life of Moses, the whole story, I find it amazing for kids to really get to know that story because it's very easy for them to picture it. And so you can really emerge into the story and see how all of that works out. But I personally also believe that we shouldn't just stay there. We shouldn't just stay in the way of how we teach our kids the story, because if we do that, we become over-familiar with it. We think we know everything about it. I've been there. I went to Sunday school. I had my children's Bible with the nice pictures in it, and you know the pictures, and you even know what it says on that page, and so you kind of start thinking, oh, I know everything. What's there for? But I believe that there's so much more to the story. For every single person of us, every single one of us can always learn more about the story if we keep meditating on the same stories over and over again. And I believe that it's really important to always dig underneath the vegetable layer, the talking vegetable layer. That is, I don't know, anybody know what kind of talking vegetables I'm talking about? Yeah, it's VeggieTales. It's a Christian TV show that probably a lot of people here grew up with, or at least saw at one point, showed their kids, or both. And I think that it's a wonderful way for kids to visualize it. VeggieTales is a wonderful story for that, but that's not all there is to it. There's more to the stories. So I invite all of us to take a look at this coming week of VBS at the life of Moses, the stories that we're going through with the kids. And we're going through it today, and we're trying to dig underneath the first vegetable layer. So our overall topic will be trust God. We trust God. And what does that trust look like? I don't know what it will look like exactly for you, I'll be honest. I don't have a play-by-play for you. I don't even really have a play-by-play for myself. I don't fully know what trusting God will look like 100%. But what I do know is, in trusting God, there's something different than in trusting myself. God, He's able to see the big picture. I see only my small picture. I only see what's around here, what's around me, and human wisdom tells me to only care about myself, about my family, about my loved ones, about my tribe. But God sees the entire world. He sees more than just me and my tribe. To trust in the way of humans is to only put myself first, put my family first, put my friends first. And everybody that's 24 or older, which is probably most of us here, all were born in the 20th century. And I think we can take a look at the 20th century and see what it means to trust in the way of humans. Never before have so many people been killed by other people than in the 20th century. It has been the bloodiest century in history of humankind. Human wisdom looks out for myself, for my small group of people, for my tribe. God's wisdom is able to put other people first, to love other people, to love God. To trust in God is to take a step back and to realize that everybody else is an image of God, just as I am an image of God. It doesn't matter if they're from my family or not. And it honestly seems upside down because our human wisdom tells us the opposite. What seems natural to us is to just care about ourselves and leave everybody in the dust because, hey, I got to make that cash, right? So what we'll take a look at with that trusting in God is we will take a look at liminal spaces. So if anyone has ever heard that word, I haven't before, but let's go ahead. Liminal space, I looked it up on Wikipedia, and it's a really easy definition, I think. In anthropology, that was a joke, by the way. I'll say that beforehand. Not that somebody feels bad for not understanding it, because anyways. In anthropology, the study of humanity, liminality is the quality of ambiguity or disorientation that occurs in the middle stage of a rite of passage when participants no longer hold their pre-ritual status, but have not yet begun the transition to the status they will hold when the rite is complete. Everything's clear, right? So, what does liminal mean? I tried to put it in my own words a little bit. At least that's what I found. I hope this is correct. I think it is. So it is a state of uncertainty during a transitional period from one stage to the next. So there is sometimes, and a lot of times this can be in seasons of life, there is times where we're in a transition from one to the next, and because we are in that transition, we are kind of in a liminal space because we're uncertain. So one of those examples would be an engagement, right? Engagement. You are going to marry that person. You will spend the rest of your life with that person, but are you married yet? No. So that engagement, but you're not boyfriend, girlfriend either. So that is something for in between. And we even have to lend a word from French to describe what the person is to me. It's a fiancé. It's not very natural for us to even think about it because it's a kind of this in-between space. Another one might be pregnancy. You're a mother, but in a different way. You're not changing diapers yet. So that is a liminal space. And another one would be, and we would be probably less familiar with this one, is a ritual. In some cultures, teenage boys are sent away as boys. They have to survive a couple days wherever they are, and when they return, they are men. And this time, as they are gone, that is what a liminal space is. And I think we can all agree on the fact that we don't want to really stay in these liminal spaces. They are uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. Because when you're engaged to someone, you don't really want to stay in that engagement, right? You want to be married, but you have to go through that passage of engagement. So God can use those uncomfortable liminal spaces. And there's many different ways of being in a liminal space. It will look different for all of us. But I bet that every single one of us has been in one. And every single time, these spaces are spaces where things change and the routine and things we usually rely on is stripped away. And only one thing remains in those spaces, and that is that God is always there. We can always trust in Him. In Israel, they enter a liminal space when they enter the wilderness. They were slaves in Egypt. They were rescued by God, but they don't have a covenant with God yet. That is about to come. So who are they? They were slaves. They're going to be in a covenant with God. So what are they in between? They're in a liminal space. So let's take a look and see how they're doing in this liminal space. As they end up in the wilderness where God protects, guides, and provides. So first, God is with us, so trust God. Our adventure in the wilderness tomorrow night will start with the parting of the Red Sea in Exodus 14. Israel left Egypt, and God led them to the beach. But it wasn't a nice family holiday at the beach. No, what was it? Let's take a look. So Israel grew to a big nation, were slaves in Egypt. God rescued them from there, and they're now in a situation where they are stuck. In Exodus 14, verse 5, when the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, the mind of the Pharaoh, which is the king of Egypt, so the mind of the king and his servants was changed toward the people, and they said, What is this we have done that we have let Israel go from serving us? They were stuck between the Red Sea and a charging army because the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh, had realized what it means to lose all of your slaves, or a lot of your slaves. And what does he do? He does what humans love to do. He loves, and what he does, he goes in to use violence and oppression on other human beings. So what happens after? God splits the Red Sea in half. All the Israelites walk through it while the Egyptian army is drowned in the sea. Some of you might have questions. I certainly have questions. And 3 questions that I have is, so how many people was it exactly? Where was the Red Sea? And what in the world is this supposed to mean? And the first 2 questions are questions that are really debated very hard about where is it exactly, how many people exactly. And I think it's very hard to determine exactly those 2 questions. Bodies of water over the last millennia have moved. So it's not really possible for us to pinpoint exactly where this was at. But what matters is this was a significant amount of water because because 600 chariots, which were the tanks of the ancient times, so 600 chariots were able to drown in there. So it was a big body of water. We're also not sure how many people left exactly because the Bible only tells us how many men left. But again, what is clear is that it was a significant amount of people leaving. And I think that's what matters. So what does it mean? How did the Israelites even end up there in this situation between a rock and a hard place? Well, let's take a look at Exodus 14, verse 1 and 2. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the people of Israel to turn back and encamp in front of Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea. In front of Baal-Zephon, you shall encamp facing it by the sea." So God was the one that led the Israelites to the sea. Wait, did he mess up? Did he not see something? Let's read on. "For Pharaoh will say of the people of Israel, they are wandering in the land. The wilderness has shut them in. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them. And I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his host, and the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord." And they did so. God foresaw what was about to happen. He planned it. This wasn't an accident where, oops, how do I fix it now? No, this was a plan. So how did he fix it? Verses 21 through 23. "Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night and made the sea dry land. And the waters were divided. And the people of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. The Egyptians pursued and went in after them into the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen." Let's jump to verse 26. "Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Stretch out your hand over the sea, that the water may come back upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen.' So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its normal course when the morning appeared. And as the Egyptians fled into it, the Lord threw the Egyptians into the midst of the sea." God might lead us into a difficult situation. There might be a situation where we don't know how in the world we could ever get out of it. But just as much as God led the Israelites into the difficult situations, he made a way to lead them out of it. So just like we might be in a hard situation and we wonder if God is here with us, God is with us and we can trust him and he will lead us out of this hard situation. And maybe I need to clarify something here real quick. Here in this story, we can read that God led the Israelites into this difficult situation, and he was with them during the difficult situation. From other passages in Scripture, we know that not every hard situation was because God led them into it. Sometimes the difficult situation happened to them. We can take a look at it. For example, David having to flee from Saul in 1 Samuel 19. And then also, we can see it later in the story when the Israelites are attacked by the Amalekites. It's because humans love to spread violence on others. But it doesn't matter why we are in the situation. What matters is that God is with us at all times. Now we have Israel and we have Egypt, and it's two different kinds of stories. Egypt trusted their own wisdom. Egypt did what humans love to do. Egypt tried to rule over people with force and violence. And what happened to them? As a result of their action, they experienced the violence they wanted to put on others. Remember what Moses said earlier? The Pharaoh had every Hebrew boy thrown into the water, and as a result, his own army died in the water. Exodus 1, verse 2. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, Every son that is born to the Hebrews, you shall cast into the Nile. And in Exodus 15, verse 4, when Moses and Miriam look back onto what just happened, Pharaoh's chariots and his host, that is the Lord, cast into the sea. The Pharaoh experienced what he tried to put with violence on others. The Pharaoh wanted to cast every Hebrew boy into the Nile, so as a result of his actions, his army was cast into the sea. The Pharaoh wanted us to use violence to end others, and at the end of the day, violence is what ended him. Human wisdom backfires. Israel, on the other hand, they trusted God. Israel relied on God's wisdom, which is maybe backwards to what it is. And as a result of their actions, they experienced life from God. We can trust God in his wisdom, no matter what happened. No matter what I did, no matter what someone else did to me. And even when it's sometimes seems like there's nowhere to go, one thing is always the same, and that is God. It doesn't matter how difficult the situation. God is with us, so trust God. Tuesday in VBS, we'll be taking a look at Exodus 16. God gives us what we need, so trust God. 43 days into the journey, we run into a pretty predictable problem. All of the lunch boxes are empty. Every single food item they had is gone. And how do you feel when you're hungry and you have to walk in the heat? I don't know, has anyone ever walked around the lake and ran out of food or something? My guess is the most of us, and at least me, we get pretty hangry. There's something about hunger and having to do a mundane task like this that just makes us angry. And so the Israelites told Moses about it. What Malachi told Moses earlier. He was like, hey, remember back in Egypt? We had food, we had water, we had structure, we had a routine. And the people of Israel said to them, can you put up 16 verse 3? I think I have it wrong here. Would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full. For you have brought us into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. Time can sometimes really make us glorify things from the past. How many times do we think things in the past were way better than they are now? How often do you wish you weren't living in the year of 2023, but 10, 20, 30, 100 years ago? How often do we think it was so much better back then? Was it really? Hey, maybe sometimes it was. Let's be honest, it might have been. Maybe some parts of life were better, but maybe some other parts were not. I believe, though, sometimes we can just remember the good old days, the good parts of what we had in the past, and kind of forget what the harsh things were. And the Israelites lived in this mindset and were like, hey, I wish it was like it was back then in the good old days. But if we take a look at what the cost was of the food that they had in Exodus 5, verse 13 and 14, the taskmasters were urgent, saying, complete your work, your daily task each day, as when there was straw. And the foremen of the people of Israel, whom Pharaoh's taskmasters had set over them, were beaten and were asked, why have you not done all your task of making bricks today and yesterday, as in the past? So was the time really better? Some parts seemed to be better. They had food and water and structure. And those are very nice things. And they seem to be gone now. But other parts were worse. And into this moment of uncertainty and wishing to be back in the past, God gives the Israelites food and then a little bit later water. He supports them and helps them out. The Israelites get meat from quail that fly in the sky in the evening. And in the morning, they get heavenly bread. They get food from heaven. God sees the problem that the Israelites are facing. God provides, and God gives them what they need. And it's in a way that probably none of them would have expected. And if we're honest, in a selfish way, was it the perfect food? I don't know. Eating every day the same food, could you do it? I don't know if I could. Every dinner, quail, every morning, this weird bready stuff. I think it would get pretty boring too. But still, they got what they need. God provided for them. And now, the Israelites can go out each day to collect the food. Instead of working each day to achieve their quota, now they collect food each day. And they even get one day off. It's the same word here in the original language, each day. Each day serving for Pharaoh under harsh labor, building storage places for food for someone else. Or each day serving God, being provided for by God, each day with a day of rest. Now God provides bread from heaven for them. The Lord said, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. Plus, so the people rested on the seventh day. God gives them physical needs. God gives them food. God gives them water. God gives them rest. Every single one of those things is needed. I know we love to glorify workaholics, but every now and then, God gives them rest because they need it on the seventh day. And God doesn't work in the way we expect it. And sometimes it might not be what we want because we want more variety, but He gives us what we need. Jesus will later kind of pick up this theme of daily bread when He teaches us how to pray in Matthew 6, verse 8. He says, for your Father knows exactly what you need even before you ask Him. And then in the Lord's Prayer, He teaches the disciples, give us each day our daily bread. So trust God and ask Him for what you need, and He will provide. It might not be what we expect, and maybe sometimes what we want, but it will be, for us, what we need. God gives us strength, so trust God. Exodus 17, verses 8 through 16. We'll be taking a look at that on Wednesday, and it's the battle against the Amalekites. And here, while in the desert, finally they have food, finally they have water, the Israelites are attacked by an army. It seems like they really can't catch a break. Finally, we've escaped the Egyptians for good. Finally, we have gotten food and water, and now a battle. Their life is pretty terrible. They're trusting God, and nothing seems to work out for them. Even though they're following God, there will be difficult situations. This time, not because God led them into it, but because humans chose violence. But here again, God comes up and He helps the Israelites in the battle. He helps the Israelites to defend against the attack of the Amalekites, who chose again what humans love to do, violence. Exodus 17, verse 8. Then Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. So Moses said to Joshua, choose for us men and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses told him and fought with Amalek, while Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. Whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed, and whenever he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. God supports the Israelites. But once again, He doesn't support them in the way that we would expect Him to support them. He could have just done, and it would all be gone. God gave the Israelites strength, though, to defend themselves while Moses' arms were lifted. But, as anyone that's ever done some contest of holding up water bottles knows, your arms get pretty heavy after a short amount of time already. And again, I'm kind of, what I would expect is to God just give him strength and be like, hey, all of a sudden he can work He can lift his arms forever long. But that's not how God works. God works through people. So instead, Aaron and Hur helped Moses. They gave him something to sit on, and they lifted his hands up. God gave Moses strength through Aaron and Hur. And it's a rather small gesture if we think about it. I mean, who can't pull up a chair on someone? I guess it was a rock, but a chair of the ancient times. Who can't pull up a chair for someone to sit on? And who can't just sit there and kind of shoulder an arm? I think we could all do it. And it's a fairly small thing to do, but it had a big effect. One small decision has a big impact in the long run. The result of it was massive. God gives us strength, sometimes directly, and sometimes through others, and sometimes both. So trust God that He gives us strength, and also give strength to someone who is in need. What do we do when someone is fighting a battle and is weak? I think we should pray for God to come and help directly, but also we should recognize that we're here, that we give our neighbors a rock to sit on and our strength to lift up their arms, and do it together. God saves us, so trust God. Day 4, we'll take a look at the Passover. We'll take a look back at how all of this happened. It's back in Exodus 12, and this is the last days of Israel having to serve the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Here, God saves the Israelites from slavery. The Israelites, they were in a position of no power, and they were set free by God. It's an absolute miracle. There's archaeological evidence that shows what the Egyptians did when 2 slaves ran away. And it's a massive ordeal. They made sure they would not reach the border of their country. They made sure they could not run away for 2. Now imagine a whole people leaving. This doesn't happen. This is not something that happens and be like, oh, you could just run away. No. For 2 people alone, they made such a big ordeal that we can find still today. And it's massive. So this is a whole people leaving. And again, how many people exactly, we don't know, but it was a lot. So this never happens. This does not happen. This has to happen through one way, and that is through a miracle of God, the mightiest God. He can do this. And such a miracle is worth remembering. The identity of the Israelites changed that very day. They were slaves to Egypt. Israelites were slaves to Egypt, and now they are saved by God. Their identity changes. And so from that day on, every single year, for thousands of years now, they still celebrate it in the Passover. Every single year. It defined their understanding of who they are as a people. They even changed their calendar so that Passover would always be in the first month of the year. It is such a big deal. Their whole identity changes. The Israelites are losing their old identity as slaves of Egypt and gain the new identity of being saved by God, by Yahweh. The Israelites don't have to serve the Pharaoh anymore, but are now able to serve Yahweh. Instead of having to complete their work, their daily tasks each day, God provides bread for them, and the people were able to gather a day's portion each day. It's a major difference. God guides us, so trust God. We'll finish off VBS with the 10 Commandments. And we'll take a look at them on Friday. And they're the first 10 laws of the biblical laws of the Israelites. And it kind of sets the scene and the expectations for the 603 laws that are to follow. So we have a total of 613. And those are the first 10. And they kind of, just set the scene, what to expect. So, and I don't know what you've heard about the 10 Commandments or the law before that the Israelites were given. Some of it might be that the Israelites were saved that way. It's a moral handbook, or it's a guidance on how to live. And I believe that the Ten Commandments are a beautiful way to live. I think most of us can agree that even Christians or non-Christians, that a lot of the commandments are pretty good. Don't murder, don't steal, don't cheat on your spouse. I think there's pretty much everybody can agree with those things. But I believe if we just look at it like that, as just a moral handbook of the Ten Commandments, we just take them out and it's like, okay, I live by this, I think we forget something. I think we forget that right then we're only looking at the vegetable layer. So let's try to dig underneath. And what I think we should do is we should not forget, never forget the context and the story around it that these commandments are presented in. So let's take a look. What is the context? When are they given? The Ten Commandments are given once the Israelites arrived at Mount Sinai. So when they arrived, and that's when they were given, so let's take a look at everything that happened before. Exodus 12. God saves the Israelites from Egypt. Exodus 14 and 15. Crossing of the Red Sea. Exodus 16. God provides manna and quail. Right after, beginning of 17, God provides water. Exodus 17. Israel defeats the Amalekites. Exodus 20. God gives the 10 Commandments. All of these things, the top four. The top four of these things happened before a single commandment was ever given to any Israelite. All of this happened before. What's the first thing? God saves the Israelites from Egypt. Israel's way to salvation, Israel's way of being saved is not through the commandments, because then these commandments would be at the very top. They didn't have to follow the commandments to make sure that God is going to save them. No, God saved them. He provided for them. He guided them. He gave them strength. And then they got the first commandment. It's the trust in God. It's the trust that when they follow God who leads them, it's the trust that when they walk behind the pillar of smoke and fire, that's the trust in Him is what saves them. God sets them free, and as a result of the freedom, the result of not having to live in slavery anymore, that is when they were supposed to live in the way of the Ten Commandments. These 10 Commandments set them apart from the way of living from their neighbors. These commandments may give them wisdom to be different, so that other nations will look at Israel and be like, hey, I kind of want to be like this. And I know for us today, they kind of seem weird, but if we look back and we compare them to laws that were around the same time in the area, you better believe that those commandments were way better. That's where you wanted to live. So Israel was supposed to live this way so that other people would look at them. It is a mission. The law is to be celebrated, not to be forced. Their Canaanite neighbors are supposed to look at them and be like, hey, I want to be them. And just like God saved the Israelites first, and living by the law came as a result of their salvation, God saves us first, each one of us, through Jesus. And because of that, our lifestyle can change. Because of that, it is a result. When other people looked at Israel, they were supposed to see what living for Yahweh is like. And I don't know where all of you are at with this whole Jesus thing. Maybe you're all for Him. Maybe you grew up in a church and you're doubting if all of this is true and you're wondering why you're still here. Maybe you've grown up outside of the church and you're just finding your way here and you're like, hey, welcome. And maybe someone dragged you here and you're like, I have no idea what this is all about. I also don't know what you've done in the past and how you grew up. I don't know I don't know what you've experienced. But no matter what you've experienced, no matter how you grew up, no matter what you have done, Jesus is here to walk alongside you. Jesus is here to be with you. Jesus preemptively covered up everything and every time that you have treated someone lower as yourself. Every time you did not treat another person as an image of God. And just like God saved the Israelites from slavery in Egypt, God saved us through Jesus, from slavery to sin, from treating others poorly. You don't have to follow the law to be saved. Nothing we can ever do will save us. We're humans. We make mistakes. We judge according to our wisdom. We choose violence. We treat each other poorly. We're unable to truly love God. We're unable to truly love neighbors as much as we love ourselves. Jesus comes and saves you and wants to save you. And he wants to be there for you. And I'm not just talking about life after death, even though that's also part of it. I'm talking about life on this very earth, right here and right now. Jesus saves us from our wrongdoings. He gives us forgiveness for all of our evil that we have introduced into the world, no matter how small. And that is when we're able to change our lives. That is when we're able to love God and when we're able to love our neighbors. It's not a need to be saved. It is a result of being saved. And when non-Christians look at us, they're supposed to see what living for Jesus is like. And they're like, I want that. It's a mission. And I want to repeat it again. We're at different stages right here. I have no idea what you personally needed to hear today. Some of you might just need to hear that you are forgiven and saved, no matter of who you are and what you've done. And maybe some here might need to hear that thanks to Jesus' forgiveness, I'm able to change my lifestyle and live by God's wisdom and not my own. God guides us, so trust God. We trust God that by living in his ways, we are living out a mission to others, and we believe that even though it's not natural for us humans to live that way, the upside down way of loving others and caring for others, and not just for ourselves and our own tribe, just as much as we care about ourselves, is actually the best way to live. God can use liminal spaces. Some things, I believe, we can only be taught if we are in those liminal spaces. When everything that we thought we can rely on, everything we thought that is normal is stripped away, when there's no routine, when there's so much uncertainty, that is when we can and we have to rely and trust on God fully. Israel didn't have to trust Moses. Israel had to trust God. And sometimes the trust seemed weird. Sometimes it seemed weird of like, why are we not just fighting back and using violence and oppression against other tribes? And we still think it's weird because, as a reminder, 20th century, bloodiest century of them all, and if we're not careful, we're going to make the 21st even worse. But instead, by trusting God in their liminal space, Israel came to Mount Sinai and entered a covenant with God. And liminal spaces are never fun. Some are less fun than others, but all of us definitely have lived through some of them. For everything that we thought was normal was taken away, and we were uncomfortable in that situation. Maybe some of you, some of us are in such a situation right now. My wife and I, we certainly are in a situation like this right now. Where are we going to end up? My internship here at Calvary is about to come to an end at the end of this month. We're going back to Germany. I'm going to finish my studies. What is going to happen after? I don't know. I don't know. All I know is that we're about to enter a liminal space that will be uncomfortable, a liminal space where there will be no routine, a liminal space where there's lots of uncertainty before we'll be able to join another church. We are knowingly entering this time that won't be fun, but there's no way around it. All that we can do is trust in Yahweh and trust that he is providing for us, that he is guiding us to our Mount Sinai, our next chapter. trusting in God and in His way of not thinking of ourselves and our loved ones first and our families, it's going to be hard, but I think it's going to be necessary. And God is going to provide. I have the trust and the faith that God is going to provide for us. He's going to guide us. He's going to give us strength in ways that we would never expect, completely different. But He will do it. How does that trust look like? I'm not 100% sure. I don't know. I don't have a play-by-play. But I pray that Yahweh will give us personally and all of you in the liminal spaces of life the wisdom, and that all of us are able to see His wisdom, that we can see how Yahweh defines what is good and what is bad, and that we can act upon it. So what? Do you trust in God and His wisdom and plan? Or do you trust in yourself and your own wisdom and plan? I want to pray. Lord, thank you for always being here for us. Thank you for always having our back. Thank you for always being for us here and that we can trust you. I pray that we can always act upon your wisdom, even if it seems upside down, that we can always love you, that we can always love our neighbors, no matter how hard and upside down it seems at times. And I pray that you show us how that exactly looks like for each one of us in our daily lives, through prayer, through reading scripture, through our community. I pray this in your name. Amen. May I please ask you to hear God's good word for you. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make His face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn His face toward you and give you peace. Amen.